Hello and welcome to my podcast. Today I'm going to talk about my summer project at university as part of my master's degree in applied economics. I've conducted a study into the relative age effect at EURO2024, and I'm just going to go through my main findings and a wee bit of discussion around that. Joining me today is James Mckinstry. He was a footballer and he's currently a physics teacher. Thanks for joining me, James. Do you mind just introducing yourself?
I think you've done it. I'm a former footballer and now teaching physics at Western Bartonshire School, and also coaching a boys team in the south side of Glasgow.
Brilliant. So just going to introduce what the relative age effect is, introduce my study, and then we can get into the main findings. So the relative age effect is a phenomenon observed in sports and education mostly, whereby earlier born individuals in a particular cohort experience advantages over later born peers. In football, previous studies suggest that it's most likely to accrue thanks to the physical advantages. So within a particular cohort, players born in January might play in the same age group as players born in December. Those January born players are up to a year, almost a year older than their December born counterparts, so you would expect them to be more physically developed, more mentally developed as well, and these differences can lead to quite a substantial advantage at the youth level. It's been observed across multiple sports, but particularly football. And also the same goes in education. So in a particular year at school, the earlier born pupils are more developed than the younger ones, and that leads to advantages in how they perform at school, how they perform in tests, exams, and this can lead to them being put in more advanced classes. They're open to more the top level teaching, and this can lead to advantages in the labour market and in the school progression. So that's kind of what the relative age effect is. My study, I've had a look at the squads at EURO2024 to determine whether there's more players born in the early month of the year than the latter months, and I've also looked at the Under-17 Championships to see if the effect is present at the youth level, and if so, then if it's even more pronounced than the top level. I then looked at market values of all the players at the Euros to determine whether there's a link between birth month and market value, and I've used that as a proxy for player quality. So basically I'm trying to determine whether there's a link between a player's birth month and quality. So before we get into findings, James, having worked in football and education, is this a concept that you were aware of before I spoke to you about it, and have you ever experienced it firsthand?
Definitely. I think, first of all, the difference between football and the education is that the cut-off dates February into March for what year you start school. Right. And I've got two boys at the moment who are January and February birthday, and when conversation with the nursery teachers was, are they ready, and do you think they should go in that, or should we defer them? So and that will happen pretty much every year. Yeah. In terms of football, it didn't used to be December 31st into January. It used to be July 31st into August when I was growing up. So it wasn't 2007s, 2008s, 2009s. It was a concept under 9s, under 10s, under 11s. And the cut-off there was July into August. Yeah. So, and I was a July birthday. So I was, growing up, I was that kind of kid who was always playing against people who were almost a year older than me. And to be honest, I think it kind of benefited me. And even when we were out in the street, in the Gorbals, and playing out football with friends and stuff like that, big sidies and stuff, it wasn't just my own age group. We were always the kind of youngest age group, so I'd always played with kids who were older. which kind of long term tended to help, I hope.
So you think your later birthdays actually helped you?
Well, it helped me.
Yeah.
I can see why it would be a disadvantage, if I'm being honest. But I mean, you read a lot online about certain coaches and stuff like that, and you know, it's easy to win games of football. You know, you just flood your team with January borns who are big, and they'll win more games than they'll lose. Obviously, with a kind of relative bit of talent, but that seems to be a, and I hope it's a kind of train of thought that's fading out the kind of key importance to on the result, and it's, you know, hopefully it's the kind of manner of the play that is becoming more important for coaches and young people, young kids as they progress through their career.
Definitely, I'm going to touch on that later on when we discuss kind of implications of the relative age effect as well. So that's a very important, interesting point. I'll just jump into the main findings from the study, then we can kind of discuss what it means for the sport and for teams. So the main finding of my study was that there was a relative age effect at the Euros. I've got the graph here, kind of shows the distribution of the birth months for all the teams at EURO2024, and it does show that there's almost twice as many January born players as there were December born players at the Euros. There's no, you wouldn't expect there to be a difference at the top level between any players born in a particular month. You almost just assume that players that make it to the top level are all kind of on par. So, barring any relative age effect, you would expect there to be a kind of uniform distribution across all months. That shows that there definitely is something going on there. There's 62 players born in January and 34 born in December. Also, there were more players born in February than any other month. So, and December was the least represented birth month there. So there's definitely something going on, and a downward slope from the first to the last month. So that was the main finding in my study, that there was a relative age effect at the Euros. As I said, I then looked at the players at the 2024 Under-17 Championships, and the effect there's way more prominent than at the Euros. So over 4 times as many players born in the first 3 months of the year than the last 3 months. There were over 10 times as many players born in January as in December. Only 7 players out of all, I think there was 20 nations, maybe 20-man squad anyway, and there were only 7 players across all squads that were born in December. So that's quite stark. Notably, the champions of the Under-17 Championships were Italy. They'd only one December-born player, and I highlighted Turkey's squad, because out of a 20-man squad, not a single one of them were born in the second half of the year. So that was quite interesting. Kind of quite straightforward. Just looking at those graphs, it's quite clear that the Under-17 level, the relative age effect is way more pronounced. But I carried out statistical tests just to prove that. Got a t-test there that shows that the mean birth month at the Under-17 level was, here is 4.6, so that's obviously January being 1, December being 12. That means sometime in April is kind of that average. And at EURO2024 it's 5.86. So you would expect, if it was a uniform distribution, you would expect 6.5 right in the middle. So both tournaments there show that the average birth month's below that, so favouring players born in the first half of the year. So moving on from that, I had a wee look to see if there was any sort of link between birth month and quality of the player, just to kind of figure out why there's so many more players born in the first half of the year than the last. I carried out a regression analysis just to figure out what the relationship was, and what that told me was that there was no significant link between birth month and market value. Some positions were significant, so for example, being a forward, being an attacking player positively affected market value, so strikers and what have you generally have a higher value than defenders and goalkeepers, etc. But age age has an impact as well. A younger player is likely to be more expensive than an older player, but the actual birth month didn't have a significant impact, so that was quite an important finding as well.
I just thought of this, did you link the birth month or relate it to actual positions?
I did actually. I don't think I included the graph in my study because I found more things I thought were more important, but I did. I think goalkeepers, there was a link between goalkeepers, so there were more goalkeepers. Obviously, it's important that they're quite tall, quite physically developed. So I think there was a relative age effect there, and I think defenders. There were more early born defenders than there were, but I think midfield it was a bit more spurious, like it wasn't. That was kind of a bit ambiguous, and then for strikers there was no effect whatsoever because you get kind of big strikers, you get smaller wingers as well.
Exactly, but defenders, goalkeepers have got to be physical.
Aye.
So maybe because you didn't find a link between the market value and the birth month is because of their positions.
Yeah.
Forwards will be more expensive than defenders.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As it like the data told me so much, and then beyond that, it's just kind of inferring things and trying to discuss why this effect is there, and that is definitely something that I looked at. I looked at the positions. Ultimately, I didn't involve it in my study because I thought it was kind of deviating a wee bit from the main purpose of it, and I only had so long to complete it. But that was something I looked at, and that is interesting. And the findings are kind of what you'd expect, like what you just said there, that there was an effect with defenders and goalkeepers, but not with midfielders, because obviously you could look at it on a micro level, and you could split like central midfielders, attacking midfielders, defensive, and there would probably be links there. But yeah, it was going a wee bit too far, I think, but it definitely it was interesting. So that was kind of that. These main findings kind of allowed me to almost make a timeline over a footballer's career and kind of tell what impact does a birth month have. So at the youth level, for wee boys growing up that are playing football, birth month really impacts their chances of standing out within their age group. So if you're a January born player, you're playing against almost every day you play against going to be younger than you. You're more developed, you may be taller, you may be stronger, which depending on your position could be a huge advantage to you. So they're more likely to stand out, they're more likely to be selected by coaches, scouts, given access to better quality coaching, and obviously the better coaching you get, the more you develop, and it's almost like a cycle that can continues to happen as they grow. So that is kind of termed in the literature as an accumulative advantage, where the advantage that they initial experience accumulates over time and it compounds. And that would explain why more January and February and March born players make it to the professional level than the December born players and the later born players in the year. And there's also literature also points towards that later born players are more likely to drop out. So with football being completely optional, it could just be that maybe later born players experience a disadvantage and they no longer kind of want to play beyond a certain level. So there's a few mechanisms there, and I'm going to discuss a wee bit what I think the main mechanisms are, because I think the data kind of allows you to paint a bit of a picture as to what's going on. So it's interesting. So I read a lot of the literature on the relative age effect, and there's quite an interesting difference between the relative age effect in football and in education. So obviously up to a certain level, education isn't optional. Everybody has to go to school, everybody goes to secondary school. So those kids that are initially maybe disadvantaged at the primary level, they still need to go through the same curriculum as the older kids do in an age group. So they maybe have more chances to catch up than a young footballer might do. They also might have more support by teachers and stuff. So the general, I mean, some studies maybe differ, but I think in general what I found from reading the literature was that there is a relative age effect in education, but it eventually balances out. And by the time kids get to finding jobs and stuff, that there isn't really any impact. That's in general. Maybe some studies might have found that it did persist, but I think in general it seems to balance out. And also, importantly, some studies did find that earlier born pupils are more likely to choose to go to university and engage in further education, which could also have an impact. So it's not the case that every study found that the effect in education wore off, but some did. Whereas in football, it's more likely to persist, and that's what my study does suggest as well. So there's a strong effect at youth level, and it's statistically significant. There's still an effect at the professional level, albeit less pronounced. So the effect slightly kind of diminishes, but it's still there, and it's still significant at the professional level. So an earlier born player is significantly advantaged at youth level. They're more likely to become professional, but once they make it to professional level, that's when it's more of a level playing field. So every professional footballer should, in theory, experience the same chances of making it to the elite level and maybe being represented at the Euros or by national level. And in terms of becoming an elite footballer, then there's no reason, or certainly the data that I've come across hasn't shown any reason why an earlier born player should be more likely to become elite relative to a later born player. So that's what the data tells me, and I found that interesting. Before I actually did this study, I had a conversation with my supervisor, and none of us really expected it to be a relative age effect at the top level anyway. As a football fan, I kind of just assume that everybody that makes it to the top are there because they're just superior. They're good footballers, and obviously I'm sure that is the case. But I was actually quite amazed when I saw that there was an impact. And then when you look at that graph for the under-17s, like it's there, black and white. It's a huge advantage, and it wasn't. I know you said you were aware of it. It wasn't something that I was really aware of before. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
I've told a lot of people, just because I've been really interested, I've told a lot of people about what I'm doing and what I've found, and everybody's like, right, okay. Like, they see, once you explain it to them, you show them the evidence of it, it's perfectly understandable.
It makes sense.
It's not a very complicated concept, really.
Nope.
So yeah, it's been very interesting. As a December born, I was born Christmas Eve, so growing up, I was playing against people that were up to a year older than me, and I did find it quite intimidating at times. Although I'm quite tall, I've always been quite tall, but I did still find it quite intimidating. And I think what I'm going to go into when we discuss kind of what it means is the different mechanisms. So it's not all physical.
No.
A lot of it's mental and emotional, and I think I struggled with that side of things when I was young. Playing against boys that are older, they're more confident, they kind of put themselves about a bit more. I think I struggled with that when I was young. I wasn't as confident or as arrogant, I suppose, as some of the older boys were, and I think that definitely has an impact in football. So I think it's really interesting when you kind of try and think, well, all right, there is an effect, but why, and how does the effect manifest itself? So that's kind of what I'd like to discuss now. So obviously I've discussed previous studies. They all point towards physical advantages, mental advantages, social and emotional, but also playing experience. So at the youth level, there was a particular study, I can't remember what one and at what exact age it was, but at the youth level, a January born player compared to a December born player is going to have played some percentage more football at any given level, and at that level they pick things up quite quickly. That could translate to quite a difference in maybe a tactical understanding or positioning or whatever it is. So that's an interesting thing as well. It's just the length of time that they've played the game also having an impact. But yeah, as I just touched on, what I find interesting to think about is the potential role played by mental and emotional development, which would put younger boys at a disadvantage. It ties in with the idea of perceived competence. So I was never particularly cocky or I never had this idea that I was kind of standing out. Although looking back, I think I don't think I was any worse or than anybody else. I think I was quite decent, but I was never confident in myself, and I think that dictated the way that I would come across when I was playing football. And being I was a defender as well, so I was always really scared to make a mistake, because you make a mistake, maybe you lose a goal, it gets highlighted. And again, that might be interesting to compare social and emotional kind of development among positions. A striker misses a shot, so what? They get another chance.
Happens naturally in training and the shooting drills and everything else. It's not highlighted, and a striker's always encouraged, you'll get the next one. Yeah. Whereas a defender, they might not get that kind of help with their resilience in the same way. It's approached differently. Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't get highlighted much more than losing a goal because of a mistake you make, you know. And I found that terrifying when I was young. Like, it would keep me awake at night. I hated it, to be honest, and it spoilt my enjoyment of the actual game itself. Like, I love football, I always have. But when I was younger, I think I was more scared to make a mistake than I think that kind of overshadowed the enjoyment that I felt from playing well. I think when I played well, it was more a sense of relief that I didn't make any mistakes, and I don't think that's a good way to develop. I don't know how anybody could change that culture in football, but I think that's certainly an important thing to look at. It was kind of out with the scope of my study to look into these things, but I'm actually interested to know, did you ever experience that kind of mindset, or did you struggle mentally with football at any age, and do you think your relative age could have played a part in that?
I think definitely. I think you talked about the confidence thing. When I was playing, I was playing with boys who were a year older, I was happy to kind of merge into the shadows, and just even in the kind of dressing room jovial chit chat. I was happy to kind of take a back seat and let these older boys be the centre of the attention. Obviously, when you went onto the football pitch, it's a team game and everybody's got to take part. But definitely, you talked about arrogance and kind of. I don't know that I would use the word in my own experience that I wasn't arrogant enough, but I certainly wasn't as vocal or as dominant through my body language as older boys, and that was a big thing. And I was the youngest in every team I played in. I think that what did help me is when I was playing in the street, and again that's something that young kids don't tend to do nowadays. In a lot of cases, kids only play football. The only time kids play football is when the coach says, right, you stand over there. Whereas for me, I was taking a ball at school, I was bouncing the ball off the wall all the way to school, all the way back, playing in school. As soon as I come home, I'd get a piece and jam, straight back out, and we were playing football. And then when we were playing football, and the kind of street football, I was playing with older kids, which, and again, I would merge into the background. I wasn't keen to do any daft stuff. I was just happy to get a game. But physically, it helped me. And emotionally, it helped me. And I think the big thing you talked about, being a defender and being frightened to make a mistake, the emotional resilience of older kids in the football team can be incredibly telling at a young age. The resilience, whether it's losing a goal, and you see we've had in our football team there now 2013s, but when they were they're 10 now, but when they were 5 and 6, when they were losing a goal, some of the younger kids would cry, or when they lost a game, it was crying, and so having to kind of build that up in amongst coaching everything else is just as important. So there definitely is a kind of almost an easy route to winning games if that's your
Yeah.
your mindset. If you want to just win games, just flood your 7-a-side team with tall January, February born players.
And just bully your way to win.
And you'll win more games than you lose.
Yeah.
And you know, all the other teams who are working on things like skills and passing and tactical awareness and positioning and 1v1s, you know, it's difficult for somebody who's smaller at 7-year-old to not be intimidated by somebody who's a lot taller, a lot more, and will use that kind of their physical side to dominate a 1v1 engagement, and trying to kind of coax young people through that. And it does tend to be towards the end of the year, these smaller kids, that you need to kind of coax through that and try and, you know, use their wee physical attributes that they have to their advantage. Because you would tell somebody who's taller to use their or faster to use their physical attributes, and that's, you know, that's part and parcel of football. Yeah,
you play with what you've got, don't you?
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting that you kind of make the link between physical and mental development, so they're obviously intrinsically linked there. Did you find that your mindset changed as you progressed from youth football up?
To a degree. There were times when, you know, there were more, as I kind of get better within my team, there were more kind of demands placed on me from coaches to be vocal, to be better, to do more things on and off the ball and to help everybody else. So that was a kind of role that you kind of grew into.
So you were almost challenged to be more vocal and more of a leader, more kind of exert more confidence.
And it was difficult when you go in, and at the time everybody was the year above me at school.
Right.
Everybody was a year above me at school, so that was difficult.
Yeah.
So even when I was in primary 7, you're sitting with these kind of big first year boys who are, you know, I'm not saying they look down on you, but they would sometimes make you aware that you were still a primary school. And then even when you went into first year and you were in second year, it was the same kind of thing would kind of crop up. And then there would definitely be a kind of more of an onus on me to come into my own.
Well, obviously the older you get, the less significance 1 year has, so you'd expect that when you get older, the relative difference between it is less and less, so that kind of makes sense as well. I was just interested to know kind of to what extent was that because you were the difference was less, or were you getting better and better and better, and that was why? Like,
probably a combination of both. I mean, I think that the age difference at 5 and 6 years old is, you know, in terms of the physical attributes can be quite stark, and that will decrease as you get older. But the problem with that, as your study shows, is that these more physically developed players at a younger age will get more exposure to a better quality of coaching and more exposure against a better quality of opposition, which accelerates their skill set more than the kind of younger kids, which is a shame.
It's a challenge because that's actually why they do play in their age groups, is to try and minimise the differences. But what can you do? Like
that's a great question, because, you know, I've played in games. Well, my kids' team, our kids, boys and girls, they've played in games where they've won 10-0. Useless. They've played in games when they've won. They've been beaten 10-0. You know, their heads are down. it's not great. You'd rather at that level you kind of saw an eachy peachy game and lost 3-2 than won 10-0. Because that, in terms of kids' development, that would be better.
Yeah.
It would help with their resilience. You wouldn't need to pick them up after a 10-0 defeat, where there's and the emotional side kicks in.
Yeah.
And again, I think when we are beaten, it's all physical.
Yeah.
It's all physical. We've actually, in the 7-a-side team that we have, so we can split our kids into, we've got 25 kids and we've got kind of 3 7-a-side teams, so to speak. So out of our kind of blue level, which would be our more advanced team, we've got a few 2014s who are actually playing 2013 football.
Right, okay.
And they struggle when it becomes physical. And I don't, one of the things I keep saying to them is it's not like somebody's going to come right over the ball and knee-high tackle you in the neck with their studs and a straight leg. It's just using their body and using their arms. And that, if they're up against somebody that's taller, somebody that's stronger, somebody that's quicker, can be off-putting for them. Yeah. And you've just got to kind of build up that resilience. Yeah. And I think exposure to that long term will help them.
Yeah. Well, I find that interesting. What I kind of tried to tease out of the data was what are the main mechanisms. So obviously we've discussed the cumulative advantage, and we've discussed the dropout rate, and obviously the physical and mental advantage as well. I haven't done any kind of statistical tests to determine causality, because I just didn't have the data to do that within the constraints of this study. But I think it would be interesting to try and gather some data on that and find some way of measuring where kids are at mentally when they're playing at different levels, just to know exactly how it changes, and then you can kind of figure out what needs to be done to try and combat that. I think building resilience would probably have a huge impact on how many later born kids actually do progress through the ranks. And I think I'm probably a decent example of that. Like, when I wasn't really enjoying my football, I'd be far more likely to want to quit than obviously when you're enjoying it, obviously. When I did stop playing competitive football was when I wasn't really enjoying it much. My dad came to me, and we were obviously getting into Everton at the time, and he said to me we could get a season ticket at Everton, go to the games every other week, but it would mean you'd need to stop playing for your team. And I think when he first said that to me, I was kind of like, do I want to stop playing? I don't know. I didn't think about it that long, so then I thought I could go to every Everton game, it'd be great. So I did. I must have been about maybe 13, 14, maybe a wee bit older.
This is the obvious question.
I can see you laughing.
Do you regret it? If you could go back and continue to play football at 13-year-old with a team, as opposed to going and watching Everton with your dad, what would you do?
I'd probably do the same. I don't think I would change
and
it.
It was just because you didn't enjoy it?
Yeah.
And by the way, as much as we're talking about developing players and these elite levels, for me, the key thing's got to be that kids turn up to their football with a smile on their face, 100%. And play with a smile, and play with a freedom. And a lot of coaches at youth level are still bogged down by victories.
Yeah,
it's all about winning.
For what?
Exactly. And
what does it mean at the youth level?
It means nothing if you don't do it with a kind of long-term goal in mind.
Yeah. The whole point of youth academies, for a particular team, having a youth academy is to produce talent for the first team. Like, that should be the main point. I mean, personally speaking, supporting Celtic or Everton, like I don't really, as bad as I don't really care how the youth teams got on. Like, you could tell me that they won a youth league, and I wouldn't mind. You could tell me they came last, and I wouldn't really mind.
Exactly, but if there's a young, exciting talent coming through, whether they win the league or not, you'd be like, and they're ready for the first team, or they're getting exposure to first team football, you
I'm looking forward to watching
Yeah.
him playing for the first team.
Yeah.
That should be the point. So I think that's a huge thing that I mentioned in my report, was that I think, how do you target the relative age effect? Some papers have discussed changing the cut-off dates, but all that does is just redistributes.
Exactly, it moves it.
Relative
So
advantages.
when I was growing up, it was July into August.
Yeah.
I think long term, and I don't know, we've not discussed this, but I actually see football, unfortunately, in my opinion, becoming more and more of a middle class sport.
Right.
So I think that your academy inequalities are going to be more and more related to parents. And this is, we've got, I think we only, at our club, we only charge £25 a month. I say only, right? And I'm not being funny, but there's a lot of clubs, boys clubs, girls clubs out there who are 60, 70, 80 a month. Now, if you've got 2 young kids, it's 160 a month.
Yeah.
Right? And I couldn't, in all good conscience, have approached my mum or my dad when I was, 10-year-old, and by the way, it's 160 quid on top of the expensive football boots, on top of everything else. Travel, the lot.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's becoming more and more middle class, and you can see this with the kind of pop up in these one-to-one sessions.
Yeah.
Where you'll have a coach with all these drills laid out, and that's upwards of 40 quid an hour. 40 quid
Yeah.
So long term, I mean, I definitely think there's still going to be an advantage there.
Yeah.
But I think it might be, 15, 20 years' time, you could be looking at parent income.
That's interesting.
In comparison to this.
I never thought about that, but I suppose why would that? It's been so long since I played at the youth level, and obviously my dad he'd have been paying for it. So
yeah.
No, it's an interesting point you've raised, and I think that kind of highlights how many factors could impact it. And this is obviously at the end I'm going to kind of discuss where could future studies add to this, and to understand. I think that's another channel we could potentially look at. It's so important to understand how the advantage accrues in order to pinpoint what you need to do to change it. And I think previously they thought, well, we'll change the cut-off dates and then December-born players they'll be fine, but then you're just making July-born players
just changing the goalpost.
Yeah. So I think, based on my findings, I mean, I've not got any causal evidence, but I think having found no impact between birth month and market value as a proxy for player quality, it would suggest that maybe there's more youth players that are later born just dropping out, and that's why early born players are more likely to stick it out and then eventually turn professional. So it's how do you challenge the dropout rate? How do you retain more players? All these kind of things, and obviously the point you've just made is interesting as well. I think there are a lot of initiatives trying to make grassroots football equal opportunities and to make it accessible for more people. But no, that's interesting.
To be fair to a lot of clubs, and I kind of know this because we're now going to 9-a-sides this season, and we need a referee. So there's an additional cost. Plus you've got the higher cost of football pitches.
Yeah.
Now, we're fortunate. Our pitches are kind of relatively, I wouldn't say cheap, but inexpensive. I'll say inexpensive. But you do hear of crazy prices that football teams are having to pay for pitches for an hour during the week, and then an hour and a half, which really they need 2 hours in the weekend. And you can see the cost of this just increasing and increasing, coupled with all these one-to-one initiatives that have sprung up everywhere, and it's very cleverly marketed because it's all elite training, professional pathway, doesn't really mean anything.
No.
It's just, these are just words, and you know, it's going to become more and more of a challenge for working class families, particularly just now in the cost of living crisis. Everything's expensive all over the place, and I know that's just now because I'm currently in the market for school bags and, oh my goodness, school shoes and everything else.
And then they want to play football on top of that.
Exactly.
No, that's interesting. The next kind of natural progression that I wanted to look at and discuss was the implications. Like, so there is an effect. I can suggest reasons why there's an effect, how there's an effect, but the kind of implications for the game, for the sport, for teams, and obviously for individuals. There's an article I really liked from the Bleacher Report, I think I sent you, and they were looking at the 2014 World Cup. From USA's perspective, they found that there was a relative age effect there, so the earlier born footballers were significantly overrepresented there. And they did a thought experiment to determine if they looked at birth rates, and they says, so based on the birth rates you would expect there to be this kind of distribution, but it turned out that there wasn't. There was way more earlier born players. If you were to artificially change that and replace some of the relatively older players with younger players, would they have performed better? And I think it kind of worked out that they crunched the numbers, and not talking about positions, but if they were to replace players, there would be a 10.8% chance of having a new best player, a 32.6% chance of a new top 3 player, and a 65.2% chance of having a new top 6 player, so a player that's one of your 6 best players. And that's all very theoretical, because obviously you don't know what position you're going to bring through, so it's not very. It just got me thinking. I thought it's an interesting way of looking at it, and obviously trying to figure out, is the relative age effect really, like, is that detrimental for the sport and for teams? Would teams perform better if they, like, maybe had a quota of early born players to later born players? I thought that was interesting. In my study, I haven't done anything to, apart from the regression, which suggested that there's no impact on player quality. I think by proving that, it may be inferred that the relative age effect is detrimental to teams and to the sport. And obviously there's a lot of papers that suggest that it does lead to a significant loss of talent. You could have, I think it goes back to coaching priorities. If they want to win games at youth level, as you say, flood the team with big players, tall players, fast players, whatever it is. That maybe flies at youth level, but by the time they get older, it's more of a level playing field. They might not cut it. They might not be technically gifted enough. They might not have the ability. So I think without having been able to say it factually that this is bad for the sport, I think it's pretty self-explanatory that it's very possible that there's a lot of talented footballers that just don't make it to the top level because of the system. And obviously I showed that the average market value per quality in the Euros was basically the same across all quarters. There's a few notable outliers that I highlighted, like Jude Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe. The two of them, I think Bellingham was born in June and Mbappe December, and he's like one of the most one of the highest rated
probably the
players.
best footballer on earth at the moment.
Probably, yeah.
Certainly forward player.
In terms of market value, he's the most expensive. So, and he's born in December. So there are obviously exceptions, and obviously somebody with exceptional talent that is just naturally gifted, they're likely to make it anyway. But how many more kind of somewhere in between are slipping through the cracks just due to the system? And I don't know how you would figure that out, but I think it's interesting to think about, and it would call for something to be done about it. So we've obviously discussed recommendations, and I think definitely the main one is coaching priorities. They need to emphasise technical skills and ability regardless of birth month. There was another article I read, kind of there was one point that stuck out to me, and it says, rare is the coach that's going to let the young player dribble with the ball, try and beat men but lose it, and just let them go again. Whereas, so if you imagine there's a December-born player who's maybe not very tactically aware, but they could have potential to be a great player, you need to let them lose the ball so many times and learn from it.
Kids have got to make mistakes.
And learn from it without having been told, stop running past the ball, you know. And I think that needs to change, otherwise nothing's going to change. I've been thinking about it in relation to Scotland. Obviously Scotland underwhelm at the top tournaments on a consistent basis. And one of the common arguments is, well, we're only a nation of 5 million, we've only got a finite talent pool.
Croatia.
Yeah, Croatia. I think Georgia did all right at the Euros there.
Was Croatia 3 million?
I don't know. There's loads of countries of comparable, if not smaller size, that perform better. And obviously it's not a club team. You can't just go and sign a player of another nationality. You can't go and sign players. So you've got to use your talent pool as efficiently and effectively as possible. And if it's possible that there's players out there that aren't making it just because they're born in December, then there's got to be a way of challenging that. And I think it comes down to coaching priorities. Absolutely.
I mean, and I see this with the kids' football, and I would never. It's very difficult to sit here and castigate a coach who's given up their time, giving up time away from their family, standing there in any weather for the way they play football. So I'm not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
But we see at 7-a-sides, big guys at the back, or a big goalkeeper who'll just punt the ball right into the opposition half, and it then becomes a kind of 50-50. And I'm pretty strict with my goalie.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't want you to do it. And I've says to one in particular, I says, look, if your dad's telling you to do it, ignore him. I says, you're passing it either there or there, and it's then up to them. But they can pass the ball back to you, but it's then up to them to go and do something. I says, well, no, just kick the ball up the park. So, but there are a lot of coaches who, because they see that almost concept of percentage football, if the ball's in the opposition half, then you've got a better chance of scoring. And that's, I'm not going to argue with that. It's fine. But in terms of kids' football, now, what was interesting, I highlighted this to a couple of people. Scotland was one of the few teams who just went long for the goalie.
Yeah. Just
went long all the time for the goalie. The vast majority of kickouts, by goal kicks, ball down, the goalie would do that, everybody go up the park, and it's a 50-50 in the air. And it didn't work. If you see any elite teams, proper football, and I'm not saying there's no time and place for that.
Yeah.
If you're 1-0 at an elite level in a cup final, and you just want to go along,
keep the ball away from defence. Yeah.
Game management they call it. But in terms of kids' football, I just think let the defender take the ball off his head and try and make a pass, or take the guy on. And if the other team get the ball off him and score, but the only thing is they've got to be resilient enough to go like that. I'll do it again.
Yeah.
And as coaches, we need to build them that platform that they're confident enough to go, I'll try it again.
Yeah.
And come up with their own ideas. Right, I went on the right side that time.
Yeah.
They read me too well. I'll maybe feint to go there and come inside, because we'll teach as part of warm-ups with ball mastery, step over and stuff like that. And I keep saying to my players, the warm-up with step overs and Cruyff turns and wee tricks and flicks that we do every night at training to make you better. It's not just a 10-minute filler. It's so that you can implement it in a game.
Yeah.
Show me it. And some of them aren't confident enough to do that. But it's disheartening when other coaches their goalies just punt the ball up the park. But these guys are giving up their time. So
it's not difficult to punt the ball long. Like I think if you teach a young player to pass the ball and to move and positional awareness and all these things, if you teach them and they try and do that, they're always going to be able to kick the ball long if they need to. I think it should be taught as more of a kind of last resort. I think when I was young, probably partly because of how I felt emotionally when I was playing, mentally, that I just didn't want to make a mistake. I think I was probably more prone to just get it away.
Put the ball away down there.
Get it away.
If in doubt, put it out.
Put out.
Yeah.
I have memories of being young and getting past the ball and literally just going, turning, kicking it out.
when you were young, did you go through the 5-a-sides, 7-a-sides, 9-a-sides?
I don't remember playing 5s.
Right.
Don't know about 9s.
So 7s
I think
into
I just
11s.
went 7 to 11.
So when I was young, 6 years old, my first team, and again I'm playing against folk that are almost a year above me, or in the year above me at school, but almost a year in calendar months. We went straight into 11-a-side.
Yeah.
At 6, 7 year old, we were 11-a-side, and we stayed at 11-a-side throughout the whole year. Played through the winter months. Standing at right back, and the ball's in the opposite wing, having to mark a winger, freezing, no involved in the game. The ball's down there. You know what it's like in a big football pitch. The ball can be down there for ages before the ball comes over until him and I get involved again. And it's that was disheartening.
Yeah.
People say didn't do you any harm. Maybe.
Yeah.
People can point to the kind of Scotland's glory days of producing Dalglish and Laws and Jimmy Johnsons and Baxters and stuff like that, and saying, "Oh, that's what they did. They played in red ash.
Yeah.
They fell and grazed their knees." Yep, they did. In spite of it, I think, not because of it.
Well, that's obviously there's players that are just always going to make it because they've got that ability, but you can only wonder how many players are maybe somewhere in between the elite and the good, maybe the very, very good players. Are there lots of them that are slipping through the cracks that we could maybe catch by changing priorities? That's kind of what I'd like to know, and maybe that's scope for a future study. But yeah, it's definitely there's something in it. Something could be done to better utilise the pool that we do have. Obviously, we're a football daft country. It's not as if we don't have enough kids coming through that like football, that want to play, that would love to make it to the top. So how do you better manage the players that you have got? And that could be the difference between getting to the next Euros, the next World Cup, and maybe winning a game, or just losing 3 games again, or 2 or whatever, and going out well. So I think they've got to look inward. Obviously, you can't sign players. We've got to look what can we do differently. I think this study definitely kind of points them towards the relative age effect and targeting that. So that's one of the main findings, or one of the main kind of suggestions that I'd like to come out of this. The data obviously tells me there's a relative age effect at youth level, there's a relative age effect at the professional level, albeit diminished, but once you're at the top level, it doesn't really impact your chances. Then other factors take precedence, like ability, maybe work ethic, attitude, and all these kind of things. So that's what the data says. Everything else that we've been discussing is kind of is just inferential from the data. You can use your football kind of know-how and intuition to kind of lead the way, but maybe future studies that have got more resources could find clever ways of proving these things, and then that's where you'd hope that policies would take inspiration from them, and hopefully lead to better outcomes for the sport and for teams, for Scotland and for individual players. So that's the whole point of it, I think, and that's more or less it. I've really enjoyed doing the study. I've enjoyed chatting it through with you. It's good to get somebody's perspective that's played at a high level. One thing I'd like to circle back to is saying that you used to like to just merge into the crowd and not stand out. Having played sevens with you, I wish you would do that on a Monday night. And
to be fair, I did say that, and by the way, that kind of merging into the crowd, you know, I can remember being when I first kind of went pro, you would be in a dressing room with men.
Yeah.
You know, 17-year-old. When I was still at school, and I was in a dressing room with men.
Yeah.
Guys like Kenny Brannigan who'd played around, Joe McLaughlin, Fraser Wishart, Rob McKinnon, Derek Ferguson, and it was easy to merge into the background.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable merging into the background. And you know, they were these guys who were there helped me immensely in so many things that they did. I can remember one night I was playing at Ross County. It was a Scottish Cup tie, and the captain, Joe McLaughlin, he played with Chelsea and Falkirk and stuff like that. I think I must have been about 18. I was playing right wing back, he was playing left side centre back. Anyway, a shot for this, in the middle of the goal, edge of the box. I was kind of caught in two minds whether I went to the ball or I covered my man in here. And he's 25 yards out. I'm thinking, I'm not going to close the ball down. I'll maybe stay here and block this pass for it. Anyway, guys took a shot, scored, and big Joe McLaughlin absolutely slated me. And it was like, oh, big licks the whole way up the ball, getting to the circle. And I can remember Kenny Brannigan, who was playing right side centre back, saying to me, "Don't worry about it, you'll be fine." And then I took a bit of confidence for that. I was like, right, okay. And then 5 minutes later, I kind of got the ball, played a 1-2, made a cross, and we scored a goal.
Right.
I was feeling good about myself. I was like, there you go. And I can remember Kenny Brannigan castigating me for the goal that was conceded 5 minutes ago, that he says, don't worry about it. So there was a time and a place for him to do it, mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And it was, he pointed out what I should have done when I felt good about myself.
Yeah.
And I'd just done something good. He went back to slaughter me, you know, we should be 1-0 up because of you, blah, blah, blah. You better go get another goal. We ended up winning the game, thankfully. But it was, you would merge. I was happy to merge in, and it wasn't until I was kind of 23, 24 that you became a kind of more natural presence in the dressing room.
Yeah.
And took part in the kind of
the banter.
Some of it was a bit beyond the scope at times. I never took part in any of that. But it could be a harsh place, a football dressing room, but it was a good place.
Yeah, and that's.
But now I can see where you're coming from, where you don't like me telling you, you know, no to shoot for 35 yards into a 7-a-side goal, Aidan. I appreciate that. I'll maybe not tell you to do that.
I'll leave out some of the things that you've called me and others on the 7-a-side pitch just for the sake of my podcast.
Right, okay, fair enough.
I don't want cancelled. I don't want you cancelled either. No, but thanks very much for joining me. It's been interesting. It's been good to get some different ideas from you as well, things I didn't even think about. So I really appreciate you
Thanks for having
joining me. Thank you also to Daniel from the Strathclyde Union for facilitating the podcast, for setting us up in here. And also thank you to Marcus, my supervisor. It's been great to have somebody that kind of shares my enthusiasm for it, and he's given me some great ideas. I've really enjoyed kind of bouncing off him and completing my study. It's been really interesting. It's also been great being able to do a master's dissertation on football, being a huge football fan, and I'm actually quite pleased with how the studies turned out. So a huge thank you. And just thanks to anybody that's listened to it. I hope you've enjoyed it and that it's not been too boring. I'll probably post it to YouTube, and I'll put a link to the press release that the university published on it, and I'll put my email address in the description should anyone want to get in touch.
Like and subscribe. Is that not what
subscribe.
Is that not what YouTubers say? Like and subscribe. Hit that like button.
Hit that like button. Get me on my socials. Let's get us trending. That just leaves me one last question. You've seen me play football. You've seen me prior to my ACL injury. Having gone through all the evidence, is it fair to say that my birthday's prevented me from turning pro? Answer carefully.
Well, put it this way. but watching you play, I'm surprised that you didn't continue playing, right? Now, whether you would have reached a professional level, I don't know, but that's why I was interested to ask you earlier on if you would do it again.
Yeah.
Would you drop out now? When you were saying you kind of feared making a mistake more than you enjoyed playing, that was difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
And I mean that genuinely. That was, I kind of felt rubbish for you. I felt rotten for you. And I just hope that none of the kids who play under me or players who have played under me, even when I was coaching and stuff like that, ever kind of felt that way as well.
Yeah.
And maybe they did. Maybe it was a comment that I've made, but it's difficult to hear, especially for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm too scared to make a mistake, so I'll just stop playing football altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of attributing that to why I stopped. Obviously, there's more to it. Like, I had the chance of the season ticket at Everton. It's what would I rather do and all that. So different. But I came back and I played. That was when I played more 7-a-sides and there was less pressure on it because it was more just playing for enjoyment. And honestly, that's when I started enjoying football again. And I've got nothing to back it up, but I genuinely believe that I became a better footballer, as daft as it sounds, from playing 7-a-sides, because
Pressure's off.
I started
Go and
playing
make mistakes, run about.
and I started playing
more touches of the ball,
attacking football rather than just lumping it. And I think I've become a better footballer. This year, my last year at uni, I played for the uni team. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I remember enjoying competitive football ever before. And actually, although I've missed 5 or 6 years of development playing competitively, I actually really enjoyed it, and I didn't feel out of place.
No.
And I played kind of for the best uni teams, because of a few different teams I played at the kind of best level, and I didn't really feel out of place. So that makes me wonder what would have been if I did go back and change it.
Particularly with your physical attribute, and again we're back to what a coach looks for. You're tall, you're quick, you're strong, but coupled with that, you're all right in the ball. Your vision's a bit lacking sometimes. You try the difficult option now and again, but that can be coached out. Don't worry about that.
Well, there you go. I'll never know, but I'll take that as a yes. I would have been a pro. That's all I wanted.
You certainly a chance. I mean, it's very difficult to look at nobody can look at a 10-year-old. Maybe people do, and think they're going to be a professional footballer. They're going to play at the top level, and because there's so many variables that could interrupt a footballing journey, and it's hard to kind of prompt them and then try and minimise them. And
well, I'm going to edit that just to sound like yes, and
right,
I'm going to send it to.
Right, okay. Here we go. No, Aidan, I think you'd have been a top player representing Scotland.
Oh, thanks, James. I'll be sure to get in touch with Everton and send it to Sean Dyche and start writing this wrong. Listen, thanks very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me. Much appreciated.